Imagine a man who pedaled his bicycle across the scorching breadth of the Sahara Desert and then turned around to conquer 8,000 meter peaks without a single tank of supplemental oxygen. Sergi Mingote wasn't just an athlete. He was a former mayor of a Spanish town who operated like a biological machine, a cyborg built for suffering. But on January 16th, on the unforgiving ice-blasted slopes of K2 in winter, gravity finally caught up with him. The tragedy struck in a section of the mountain where seasoned veterans simply do not fall. The fixed ropes were secure. The weather was unexpectedly perfect for a winter ascent. So what actually knocked this titan off his feet? Was it a momentary lapse in judgment or a stray rock falling from above? This is the story of how a single fleeting second shattered a grand vision and abruptly ended the life of a mountaineering legend. The story begins in 1971 in the small, unassuming Catalan town of Pares del Valles. A child is born here who 2 decades later would force physiologists to completely rethink what the human body can handle. Sergi Mingote didn't just grow up, he evolved, refusing to follow the standard script that society hands out to young men. While his classmates were busy picking a single hobby, Sergi was training for everything at once. He was running, swimming, cycling, and skiing, transforming his body into a versatile engine designed to process pain and push past the brink of exhaustion. His coaches watched in disbelief, often shaking their heads and warning that it was too much load for one person to bear. But Sergi was relentless. He could sense that his true limit was positioned far beyond the horizon in a place most people are too afraid to even look toward. Cut to 1995. We are on a steep alpine slope. Mingote mounts a mountain bike and launches himself downhill, reaching a terrifying speed of 100.7 kilometers per hour. That speed secured him a world record. Imagine the adrenaline flooding his system, the wind tearing at his face, and the loose rock shifting under his tires, one slip, one twitch, and it would be lights out. But he held the handlebars with a grip of steel. At the bottom, he was greeted not by death, but by thunderous applause and a new title, one of the fastest men on Earth on 2 wheels. But adrenaline alone wasn't enough. He needed to test his endurance. He swapped speed for distance, turning his eyes to the Sahara, an endless ocean of sand where the ground temperature is hot enough to melt rubber. Then the Gobi, a brutal desert of jagged rock. Mingote crossed them both on his bike, grinding out kilometer after agonizing kilometer, day after burning day. There is absolutely no romance in this kind of suffering, just blistering heat, unquenchable thirst, and the nagging question, how much more abuse can one body take? Then came the Ironman and Ultraman competitions. These are races where only a tiny fraction of starters ever cross the finish line. We are talking about a 3.86 kilometer swim, followed by 180 kilometers on a bike capped off with a full 42 kilometer marathon, and for Sergi, that was just a warm-up. The Ultraman competition takes those insane numbers and doubles them. It is a level of exertion where the body literally screams at you to stop. But Mingote had mastered the art of ignoring that scream. He finished these races again and again. Sponsors began to take notice, and journalists clamored for interviews, but Sergi was already looking up, setting his sights on something much taller. By the late 90s, he found himself standing at the foot of the Himalayas, realizing that this was the ultimate arena. The real test wasn't speed or distance anymore, it was altitude. He was entering a world where oxygen is a luxury commodity, and every single step feels like it might be your last. While most climbers rely on oxygen tanks, Mingote refused them. His logic was simple: why wear a mask when you can train your lungs to function at their absolute biological limit? In 1998, he tackled Cho'oyu, the 6th highest peak in the world, standing at 8,201 meters. Insiders often call it the easy 8,000er, a training ground for the elite club. But without supplemental oxygen, easy becomes pure torture. We're talking about splitting headaches, legs that feel as heavy as lead pipes, and a heart pounding so hard it feels like it might burst through the chest. Yet Mingote kept moving, meter by meter. He reached the summit, stayed for a few brief minutes to snap a photo, and immediately began his descent. There was no overwhelming euphoria, just cold, hard calculation. Step 1 was complete. Next came 1999 and Shishapangma, standing at 8,027 meters. It is the 14th highest of the giants, but it is notoriously treacherous, known for massive avalanches, hidden crevasses, and weather that turns deadly in a heartbeat. Even the most experienced alpinists, men and women with dozens of successful summits, have vanished on its slopes. Mingote climbed it without oxygen, his heart rate redlining the entire time, but he was accustomed to pushing the envelope. All those years of Ironman triathlons and desert treks were finally paying dividends. When he reached the summit, it was the second tick on his list. Physiologists started studying him as if he were a medical anomaly. His heart, his lung capacity, his mitochondrial efficiency, everything functioned on a level completely separate from the average human. Unknowingly, Mingote was building the physical foundation that a decade later would allow him to attempt the most dangerous routes on the planet. But he didn't know that future yet. For now, he was simply a climber obsessed with going higher, and higher, and higher still. With 2 8,000ers under his belt, Mingote knew it was time to face the mountain that calls to every climber's soul, Everest. 8,849 meters of rock and ice, the roof of the world. It is a place where glory isn't measured in words, but in sheer altitude. The year was 2001. He chose the Tibetan side, the northern route. Technically, it is considered easier than the south, but psychologically it is a brutal nightmare. It involves crossing endless fields of snow-battling winds, strong enough to launch a human into the void, and navigating a final ridge where every step is a gamble with death. Mingote climbed without a dedicated partner, integrating himself into the flow of the main expedition, utilizing fixed ropes, and this time using supplemental oxygen. It wasn't pure alpinism in the strictest historical sense, but on Everest, the rules change. Here, staying alive is more important than style points. He successfully reached the summit holding the Catalan flag against a backdrop of infinite sky. Making it back down alive was the true victory, because the slopes of Everest are an open graveyard littered with the frozen bodies of those who overestimated their strength or underestimated the mountain's cruelty. He returned to Barcelona as a hero. The press swarmed him and sponsors were knocking down his door. But Sergi knew deep down that one Everest summit wasn't enough. He needed to cement his legacy. In 2003, he returned to the top of the world, but this time he approached from the south through Nepal. He took the Hillary and Tenzing route, the classic legendary ascent. First, he had to navigate the Khumbu Icefall, a terrifying maze of shifting ice blocks the size of houses. Then came the Yellow Band, a vertical rock face where your life depends entirely on a single rope. And finally, the South Col. The South Col is a deathly plateau where high-altitude winds shred tents to ribbons and your oxygen supply runs out faster than the math predicts. Once again, Mingote made the ascent using bottled oxygen and the infrastructure of commercial expeditions. To the purists, this was a compromise, a diluted achievement. But Sergi wasn't interested in playing by the purists' antiquated rules. He was playing a modern game, the media game. On this climb, he had an ace up his sleeve that would revolutionize the sport. At the very summit of Everest, he unpacked satellite gear, a camera, a transmitter, and an antenna. The Catalan channel TV3 was about to launch the first ever live broadcast from the highest point on Earth. People back home sitting comfortably on their sofas were about to witness something previously reserved for the bravest adventurers. Mingote spoke directly to the camera, gasping for breath in the thin stratospheric air. His face was flushed red, his lips were cracked from the cold, but his eyes were blazing with life. This wasn't just a climb anymore, it was a performance, and Sergi was the undisputed star. All of Spain fell in love with him. He wasn't just a mountaineer, he was a master storyteller who could transform unparalleled suffering into a compelling narrative. He was invited to every major talk show, spoke at prestigious conferences, and wrote articles. Mingote became the face of high-altitude mountaineering in a country that loves mountains but has none that reach the coveted 8,000-meter mark. He built a personal brand and was completely unapologetic about the commercial aspect of his career. Expeditions cost a fortune, serious money. Without big sponsors, without media coverage, and without making a few compromises, you simply do not get to the Himalayas. During this period, Sergi wasn't trying to be an alpinist purist. He used the oxygen, he used the fixed ropes, and he relied on Sherpa support. This was his era of accumulation, gathering experience, building connections, and securing resources. He was studying Everest from every conceivable angle, mastering the logistics and figuring out how to work with the altitude as a partner rather than an enemy. The critics might have scoffed, but Mingote ignored them. He had a master plan and he was just getting started, but in 2003 he found himself at a massive crossroads. To one side lay the Himalayas' endless climbs and the glory of the mountains. To the other lay an office, endless paperwork, and the very real power to change people's lives. Surprisingly, he chose the latter. He enrolled at ESAID, one of Europe's top business schools. Sergi wasn't just going back to school for a diploma to hang on his wall. He was there to acquire tools, project management, finance, and strategic planning skills you cannot learn on the side of a frozen mountain. He finished the program and immediately jumped into the shark tank of politics. The Socialist Party of Catalonia welcomed him with open arms. Mingote was a familiar face, a charismatic athlete with an inspiring story of overcoming impossible odds. He was the perfect candidate. His first role was as a sports counselor in his hometown of Parets del Vallès. It was a small town of 20,000 people with typical small-town problems. Some might have called it a step down after conquering Everest, but Mingote saw it differently. Here, he could build real infrastructure, open sports centers, and create programs for the youth. It wasn't about the adrenaline rush anymore, it was about influence. It wasn't about reaching summits, but about laying foundations. He worked like a man possessed, diving into meetings, board sessions, budgets, and negotiations. The endurance he had built in the scorching deserts and the death zone was now being tested in marathon office sessions. His colleagues often wondered where he found the energy. Sergi would just smile. After surviving Shishapangma, a heated budget meeting felt like a walk in the park. In 2011, he ran for mayor and won. Now he wasn't just a counselor, he was the #1 person in town. His responsibilities multiplied 100-fold. Every decision he made was under a microscope. Every mistake landed on the front page of the local papers. Slowly, the Himalayas began to fade into the background, pushed further and further away until they disappeared completely behind a horizon of administrative routine and civic duty. 7 long years drift by without a single expedition to the death zone. Not once does Mingote pack his bags for an 8,000er. His technical gear gathers dust in the closet, untouched and silent. He ignores the route maps and deliberately avoids checking the weather reports coming out of Nepal. To the outside observer, he looks like a man who has moved on. His old climbing partners, guys who live and breathe high altitude, keep nagging him with the same question, is this really the end? Have you actually hung up your boots for good? Sergi always deflects with vague, non-committal shrugs. Maybe he'll say, or I'm just starting a different chapter. He talks about the importance of politics, the stability of family life. But deep down, the body has a memory of its own, and it refuses to let go. He maintains a punishing training regimen. Road cycling, trail running, ski mountaineering. He throws himself into the same endurance grinders that forged his physique 20 years prior. He keeps his heart rate redlined, addicted to the burn. His lungs never lose the capacity to function at the absolute limit of human endurance. His fellow bureaucrats at City Hall are baffled by his lifestyle. They can't comprehend why anyone would torture themselves with insane workouts at 5 in the morning before tackling a full day of administrative headaches. Mingote never bothers to justify it to them. He just keeps pedaling. He just keeps running. He maintains the machine, keeping it oiled and ready for a war he hasn't officially declared yet. But beneath the calm exterior of the public servant, an ember is still glowing hot. Sure, politics gets things done, but it never delivers that electric jolt of clarity he found on the jagged peaks. Up in the stratosphere, the rules were binary and brutal. You summit or you fail. You survive or you perish. Down here in civilization, everything is a murky shade of gray. It's a life of endless compromises, shaky coalitions, and circular negotiations. By all accounts, he's an excellent mayor. The city is prosperous under his watch, but his spirit is starving. 7 years might pass in a blink for a politician, but for a high-altitude alpinist, it's an entire lifetime. In the mountains, that's enough time for a generation of legends to rise and fall. New prodigies are making names for themselves, fresh records are being shattered, and new tragedies are etched into the ice. Mingote watches his theater play out from the cheap seats. He devours expedition reports and gazes longingly at photos of wind-scoured ridges. Deep in his gut, he knows the truth. This isn't retirement, it's just an intermission. A long, frustrating pause, but the show isn't over. The calendar flips to 2018. Mingote sits alone in his mayoral office, the hum of the city outside the window, and drafts his letter of resignation. The decision is entirely his own. There are no scandals chasing him out, no political pressure forcing his hand. It is simply time. The news sends a shockwave through his department. His career trajectory was vertical regional leadership, perhaps a seat in parliament, but he's walking away from it all. Sergi just shakes his head at their confusion. 7 years chained to a desk is a prison sentence he served in full. It is time to return to the realm where the air is too thin to sustain life, where success isn't measured in votes or budgets, but in vertical meters above sea level. He is 47 years old. In this game, that's the age where most elite climbers are transitioning to the lecture circuit or guiding wealthy tourists on trekking holidays. But when Mingote looks at the data, he doesn't see a closed door. He sees a sliver of daylight. It's a narrow window of opportunity that is shutting rapidly, but it hasn't latched yet. He retrieves the list of the world's 14 8,000ers and sketches out a timeline. Beside the list, he scribbles a single audacious figure, 1,000 days. He plans to bag every single peak in less than 3 years. He christens the project 14 times 1,000 Catalonia. This goes beyond personal ambition or a midlife crisis. It is a direct gauntlet thrown at the history books, challenging the speed record held by the Korean legend Kim Chang-ho, who took 7 years and 10 months to complete the circuit. Mingote intends to slash that time by nearly 2/3. His friends think he's completely lost his grip on reality. Potential sponsors are hesitant to back a suicide mission, but Sergi is immovable. He has the bedrock for it. 2 8,000ers already conquered decades of suffering in endurance sports and an ironclad discipline. Crucially, he has a blueprint, but the plan includes a radical, non-negotiable stipulation that raises the stakes to lethal levels. No supplemental oxygen, no tanks, no regulators, no artificial life support. He will face the death zone with nothing but his own biological capacity, his own heart, and his own stubborn will. This represents a total philosophical U-turn from his Everest campaigns in the early 2000s. Back in those days, he climbed with the bottle and offered no apologies for it. Now he rejects it outright. Mingote clarifies his stance to the press with chilling pragmatism. Without oxygen, you are operating on a countdown timer that cannot be paused. Every second you linger at that altitude strips your body of life. You don't have the luxury of waiting out a storm. You can't camp out in the death zone for days. You either move with speed and precision or you die. It's about the purity of the ascent. It is real alpinism. The purists in the community nod in respect, while the commercial expedition leaders shake their heads at the insanity of it. But Sergi has tuned out the noise. He begins training with the intensity of a man possessed. He's tearing up mountain trails, grinding his bike up vertical switchbacks, and sleeping in high-altitude simulation tents in the Alps to trick his blood into producing more red cells. He is approaching 50, yet his physiology is clocking numbers that rival a professional athlete in their 30s. His mitochondria, tempered by decades of punishment, have become hyper-efficient, capable of wringing energy from air that is practically devoid of oxygen. Amidst the sweat and pain, he secures an official title to bolster his mission. Mingote is named the ambassador for the Pyrenees-Barcelona 2030 Olympic bid. Catalonia dreams of hosting the Winter Games, and they need a figurehead. A climber taking on the most hostile environments on Earth fits the bill perfectly. It's a marketing goldmine. Sponsors suddenly see the vision. The financial backing begins to flow. The logistical puzzle pieces snap together. The project is a go. Mingote unveils a map dotted with 14 targets. Beside each peak, he notes the altitude, the technical rating, and the narrow seasonal windows. He is submerged in data studying approach routes, analyzing mortality statistics, hiring Sherpa support teams, and architecting the calendar. 1,000 days might sound like a long time, but in the Himalayas, it's not a marathon. It is a frantic sprint through the stratosphere where a single misstep or a bad weather forecast can end your life. Summer, 2018. He touches down in Islamabad, Pakistan. Stepping onto the tarmac, Mingote is hit by that distinct heavy blend of heat dust and adrenaline. It has been 7 years since he stood in the shadow of the giants. 7 years of boardrooms, handshakes, and sterile offices. Now looming on the horizon is the Karakoram, a range that makes the Nepalese Himalayas look almost tame by comparison. It is wilder, more remote, and significantly more lethal. His first target is Broad Peak. Standing at 8,051 meters, it is the 12th highest point on the globe. Climbers call it Broad Mountain because of its immense, sprawling summit ridge that seems to go on forever. On paper, it is technically less demanding than its neighbor, K2, but easier is a dangerous word at 8,000 meters. Every season, the mountain claims the lives of those who get complacent or misjudge the clouds. Mingote begins his ascent without the crutch of oxygen. He moves slowly, methodically. He locks into a hypnotic rhythm. His body's waking up from its long slumber like a vintage engine roaring to life after years in a garage. The machinery is rusty but functional. His lungs are on fire. His head throbs with the altitude, but he keeps pushing. Step inhale. Step exhale. He moves through the high camps, navigates the fixed lines, and launches his final attack. The summit is reached. He unfurls the Catalan flag, snaps the proof photo. Then the immediate descent. In a standard expedition, a climber would retreat to sea level and rest for weeks to recover from the cellular damage. The death zone burns through muscle and energy reserves like a wildfire through dry timber. But Mingote doesn't have the luxury of time. The clock is ticking on his 1,000 days, and looming right next door is the big one. K2, the second highest mountain on Earth, 8,611 meters of vertical hostility. It is known as the Savage Mountain for a reason. It is often called the Killer Mountain. The statistics are grim historically, for every 4 climbers who reach the top one dies trying. Legends of the sport have vanished on its slopes. Entire teams have been wiped out by its storms. K2 offers no forgiveness. Mingote rushes down from Broad Peak, spends the bare minimum time recovering at base camp, and immediately pivots to the neighboring giant. Only 7 days separate the two summits. In the world of classical mountaineering, this is absolute madness. The human body physically cannot repair itself that fast. But Mingote is banking on a secret weapon, a depth of endurance so profound that he can operate on a physiological deficit that would kill a lesser man. K2 welcomes him with gale force winds and temperatures that freeze bone. He takes the Abruzzi spur, the standard route, but there is nothing standard about it. It leads to the Bottleneck at 8,200 meters, a terrifyingly narrow couloir beneath a hanging glacier where climbers often get stuck in traffic jams, wasting precious oxygen and warmth. Mingote is climbing light and fast without supplemental oxygen. This gives him a mobility advantage. He isn't burdened by heavy cylinders or the logistics of swapping them out, but it leaves him exposed. If he gets stuck behind a slow climber in the Bottleneck, his body will shut down. The weather is erratic. Violent gusts are shredding tents at the high camps. The mercury drops to 40 degrees below zero. Most teams are bailing out, retreating to base camp to wait for a better window. Mingote studies the charts and spots a tiny opening, a brief lull of a few hours. It's barely enough, but it's all he's going to get. He commits to the push. He climbs into the night. The beam of his headlamp cuts a thin tunnel through the crushing darkness. Every movement is pure agony. His lungs scream for air that isn't there. His hands clamp onto the ropes, mechanically muscle, memory taking over where conscious thought fails. His mind is a fog, but a primal survival instinct drives his legs. The Bottleneck looms. It is a claustrophobic chute of rock and blue ice. Mingote squeezes through the danger zone, refusing to stop. He hits the final ridge just as dawn breaks the sun, setting the horizon ablaze with crimson fire. The summit of K2, he stands on the second highest pinnacle of the world, gazing down at Broad Peak. Just 7 days ago, he was standing over there. Now he is here. 2 8,000ers in a single week without oxygen. It's a feat that has never been accomplished in the history of the sport. A new world record. Yet standing on top of the world, Mingote feels no rush of triumph. There is only bone-deep exhaustion and a quiet realization. The plan is working. This crazy dream is actually possible. The descent is a hallucination of fatigue, his legs buckling under him, his vision blurring. But when he stumbles back into base camp, he is hailed as a gladiator. The Spanish press goes wild with the news of the record. The mountaineering community is forced to recalibrate their expectations. Mingote, a 50-year-old ex-politician fresh off a 7-year hiatus, hasn't just returned to the game. He has kicked the door down, 2 peaks down, 12 monsters left to go. The countdown clock reads 993 days remaining. The Karakoram season is finished, but ahead lie the vast ranges of Nepal and Tibet. It is autumn 2018. Mingote hasn't even had a moment to process the Karakoram doubleheader, but the schedule is a cruel master. Next up, Manaslu. Standing at 8,163 meters, it is the 8th highest peak on the planet. It means a shift to Nepal, a new country, a new set of logistical headaches, and a different weather system. But the mission parameters remain rigid. Climb without gas, keep the momentum rolling. Manaslu is often marketed as an accessible 8,000er. A training ground for high-altitude tourists, but Mingote knows that in the death zone, accessible is just a marketing term for slightly less likely to kill you. The danger zone isn't just about vertical height, it's a minefield of shifting ice avalanches waiting to trigger an air so thin it actively rots your brain. Every single climbing season, the roster of names, climbers who went up but never came down, gets tragically longer. Into this meat grinder steps Mingote, helicoptering straight into base camp and immediately sinking with the mountain's lethal pulse. Most climbers waste weeks sitting around letting their blood thicken and their lungs adjust. Not him. He's on a blitzkrieg schedule, touchdown to top out in just 10 days. For anyone else, especially without bottled oxygen, this would be a suicide mission. But Sergi isn't starting from zero. His physiology is still tuned to the death zone from the Karakoram. His cells haven't forgotten how to survive where they shouldn't. He ascends systematically ticking off the high camps. 1, 2, 3, 4, like clockwork. The air gets thinner, the wind crueler, and the margin for error vanishes. He doesn't pretend he's blazing the trail alone. He's walking a path carved out by the Sherpas who fix the lines and haul the heavy gear. Mingote rides their wake, and unlike the glory hounds, he owns that fact completely. When he gets back down, the first thing he does is shine the spotlight on the Sherpa team, listing them by name and celebrating their grunt work. It's a refreshing change in a sport where Western egos often crop the support staff out of the frame to sell a solo hero narrative. Sergi refuses to play that game. He gives credit exactly where it's due. He admits he's part of a larger machine, utilizing the ropes and the camps, but he brings his own lethal edge to the equation: raw speed and a strict refusal to use supplemental oxygen. It's a flawless tactical strike, 10 days from entry to exit. Just like that, he bags his third 8,000-meter giant of 2018. Knocking down 3 titans in a single season is unheard of. His 14 by 1,000 challenge isn't just on track, it's demolishing the timeline. Back in Spain, the press is going wild, painting him as the new king of alpinism, and sponsors are scrambling to throw cash at him. Yet amidst the champagne popping and headlines, Mingote stays grounded. He realizes this platform is worth more than just vanity metrics. If the world is watching, he's going to show them something that matters. He channels the influx of resources into launching the ONAT Foundation. The goal is specific and noble, using outdoor sports, mountaineering, trekking, cycling as a vehicle to integrate people with disabilities into society. This isn't a passive charity. He's hiring professional coaches, locking down sports facilities, and organizing real events. It's the natural evolution of his background in public service, amplified by his athletic fame. Parallel to the foundation, he rolls out the Solidarity Project, a mechanism to directly tether his high-altitude suffering to fundraising for those who suffer on the ground. Suddenly, the mountains aren't just jagged trophies to collect. Each expedition transforms into a megaphone for social causes, a way to generate funds and awareness. Mingote has successfully weaponized mountaineering, turning the selfish pursuit of summits into a communal engine for social progress. His inner circle thinks he's lost his mind. They look at his schedule, the brutal training, the death-defying climbs, the corporate obligations, and ask, why pile more on top of a crushing load? Why invent new burdens when gravity is already trying to crush you? Sergi doesn't hesitate with his response. Because I can. For him, the summit is just a podium. To broadcast a message, limitations are largely psychological constructs. If a regular guy from a sleepy Catalan village can stand on the savage peak of K2, then a person in a wheelchair or with a cognitive difference can absolutely crush their own metaphorical Everest. The year 2018 wraps up in a blaze of glory. 3 monsters conquered, records shattered, and a charitable legacy established. The project is making waves globally. But back in the quiet of his home in Parets del Vallès, Mingote stands before a wall map, pinned with the 14 highest points on Earth. He draws a line through 3 names. 11 giants remain. The 1,000-day timer is relentless, but his momentum is terrifying. As the calendar flips to 2019, he looks toward the spring season in Nepal. His crosshairs settle on Lhotse, 8,516 meters of rock and ice, the 4th tallest sentinel in the world. It lives in Everest's shadow, sharing the famous route up to the South Pole, but don't let that fool you. The final push is a nightmare distinct from its neighbor, a steep, glassy face known as the Lhotse Couloir. It is vertical, technical, and unforgiving. This is Mingote's next battlefield, the 4th step in his grand design. He won't be tackling this beast solo. He teams up with Ivan Tomov, a hardened Bulgarian alpinist with a resume of high-altitude warfare. They aren't strangers. They've shared ropes in the Alps and built a rapport over years of shared danger. At 8,000 meters, trust is the only safety net you have, and theirs is absolute. Tomov is a purist too, climbing without the crutch of bottled oxygen. They are perfectly matched in style and philosophy. The strategy is stripped down, strike hard, tag the top, and get out alive. When the meteorologists predict a break, in the jet stream they launch. Lhotse stares back at them, a 1,200-meter wall of blue ice rising straight into the stratosphere. In the death zone, the air is so thin it feels like vacuuming dust. Every movement is a violent protest from the body. Every step is a war against the planet's gravitational pull. Mingote and Tomov move like 2 parts of the same engine, checking anchors and communicating in guttural, wind-torn monosyllables. They breach the summit ridge. Triumph. They embrace snap the mandatory proof photos and soak in the view from the 4th highest point on Earth. It's another tick mark for Mingote. They turn to descend battered and drained, but it feels like standard fatigue. Just another day at the office or so, they think. They drop a few hundred meters when the rhythm breaks. Tomov starts lagging his movements, jerky and wrong. Mingote spins around and sees the Bulgarian gripping his skull, stumbling like a drunk. It's the mountaineer's worst nightmare, high-altitude cerebral edema. His brain is swelling, crushing itself against the skull. Panic spikes. Mingote screams at him, slapping his face to spark some lucidity, but Ivan is already fading, babbling nonsense. The only cure is descent rapid and immediate. Sergi takes the lead, practically hauling his friend's unresponsive body down the ice. It's dead weight, and in his delirium, Tomov is thrashing, fighting the very man trying to save him. Mingote enters a fugue state fueled by adrenaline and terror. He's operating on muscle memory, ignoring his own screaming lungs. Then the mountain decides to take a swing. A crack echoes from above, the sickening clatter of rocks breaking loose. A barrage of stone and ice grape shot sweeps the face. Without thinking, Sergi throws himself over Ivan, acting as a human shield. Whack. A boulder slams into his side. The snap of the rib is audible, followed by a blinding white-hot pain. His breath catches lungs seizing, but he refuses to let go of the rope. He keeps lowering his friend. It is a descent into Hell Meter by agonizing meter, past Camp 4, down to Camp 3. By now, Tomov is fully comatose. Inside the flimsy shelter of a high camp tent, Mingote frantically administers dexamethasone and forces fluids radioing base camp with desperation in his voice. But the choppers can't reach this altitude, and the rescue team is hours of climbing away. Ivan's breathing rattles a wet, heavy sound that fills the small space. Sergi sits vigil, gripping his friend's gloved hand, whispering lies that everything will be fine, that help is coming. But the mountain has already claimed him. Slowly the rattling stops. Ivan Tomov passes away right there in the cold, a victim of the thin air. Staring at the body, Mingote feels a catastrophic structural failure within his own soul. The broken rib is nothing. His spirit has snapped. The pact of the rope one goes up, both come down is broken. The rest of the descent is a blur of agony and grief, his chest firing, daggers of pain with every gasp, his mind completely numb. The physical torture is manageable, the psychological wreckage is not. Back at safety, he faces the cameras, but the bravado is gone. His voice trembles as he admits the truth. I am destroyed. My head is gone. I cannot go on. He pulls the plug on the expedition immediately. The 14 by 1,000 machine screeches to a halt. Sponsors are left in the dark, and the media narrative shifts from hero worship to tragedy. The papers print Tomov's obituary side by side with editorials questioning if Mingote has the stomach to return. He has 4 peaks in the bag, but the cost has been exorbitant. 10 mountains remain, but the math doesn't make sense when the variable is a human life. Mingote retreats to his home in Spain, spending days in silence just staring at that wall map. He refuses to put a red cross through Lhasa. Instead, he takes a marker and writes a name next to the peak's elevation, Ivan Tomov. Bones knit back together, but the moral fracture remains. Is this pursuit worth dying for? Is it worth watching your friends die for? How do you lace up your boots and go back when you know Ivan is still up there, encased in ice at 8,000 meters, forever freezing in the death zone? By summer 2019, the call becomes too loud to ignore. He books a flight to Pakistan, returning to the jagged skyline of the Karakoram. But the man who steps off the plane isn't the same one who left. He is somber, introverted, and deadly serious. The media circus is gone. Now it's just about the climb. He aims for Nanga Parbat, the naked mountain, standing 8,126 meters tall. It earned the moniker Killer Mountain for good reason. In the 1930s, it swallowed entire German expeditions whole. Its southern flank, the Rupel face, is a wall so massive it warps your sense of perspective. That face is a 4.5-kilometer vertical tombstone. Mingote wisely chooses the Diamir face on the north side, though calling any route on Nanga Parbat safe is a delusion. He sticks to his code, no supplemental oxygen, carrying a pack strip to the bare essentials. He eliminates every ounce of dead weight. At this altitude, a candy bar feels like a brick. He ascends with surgical precision, bypassing the lower camps without pausing to rest. He skips the acclimatization rotation entirely. His body, scarred and hardened by Lhasa, is already prepared for the lack of air. His muscle memory takes over, recalling the trauma and the triumph of the previous climbs. He pushes to the summit of Nanga Parbat, his 5th conquest. Standing on the roof of the world, he doesn't cheer. He looks out over the clouds and whispers a dedication to Ivan. The descent is executed with cold professional efficiency. He barely lets his boots dry at base camp before he's packing up. A jeep ride of flight and a blur of travel logistics later, he stands at the foot of the next giant within 2 weeks. Karakoram 2, 8,035 meters. The 13th highest peak on the planet awaits. Nestled in the spectacular amphitheater of the Karakoram Massif, G2 is often dismissed as the easier sibling of Karakoram 1, but easy at 8,000 meters is a fatal lie. The air is still deadly, the temperatures still plunge to Arctic levels, and the slopes are still loaded with unstable snow ready to slide. It offers the standard Himalayan death package, but the real danger isn't the mountain, it's the clock. Only 15 days have passed since Nanga Parbat. This pace is blistering even for his record attempt. Physiologically, he is running on fumes his body denied the weeks it needs to repair the cellular damage of the death zone. However, the Karakoram weather gods are offering a rare window of clear skies, and in this game, you don't say no to an open door. The summer season is a blink-and-you-miss-it affair. Mingote racks up. He approaches G2 with the same philosophy that has kept him alive so far: move light, move fast, and don't stop until you're down. He carries almost nothing. Rationed calories, strictly calculated fuel, and barely enough gear to survive a night. It is a strategy of guerrilla warfare against gravity: strike fast, strike hard, and vanish before the mountain can kill you. While the Sherpa teams do the heavy lifting, breaking the trail and securing the fixed lines, Mingote makes sure to acknowledge every single one of them by name. He respects their labor, but he doesn't linger. He steps into their tracks for a moment, then shifts gears, launching into a blistering pace that leaves even the strongest climbers gasping in his wake. Then finally, the summit. This marks his 6th conquest of an 8,000er. We are halfway through the summer of 2019, and he has already claimed 2 massive peaks this season. As Mingote begins the long, dangerous descent, the tension in his face finally breaks. He cracks a smile. It is a rare expression, the first genuine moment of joy he has allowed himself since the dark days on Lhotse. 6 giants down, 8 more standing in the way. He is not quite at the halfway mark of the total project, but the psychological tide has turned. The momentum is surging through his veins again. The 14 times 8,000 project is breathing. Back home, the Catalan press is having a field day, plastering his face across every paper. Mingote returns from tragedy. Sirdi, they write, 6 peaks in 12 months, a new speed record. The phone at base camp won't stop buzzing. Sponsors are lining up to shake his hand and discuss the lucrative future. But Sergi has built a wall around his mind. He no longer hears the applause or the criticism. He has mastered the art of selective deafness, tuning out the static of the civilized world to focus entirely on the primitive reality of high altitude. For him, the universe has shrunk down to rock ice and the relentless ticking of the clock. Sitting in the cold solitude of base camp, he opens his battered notebook and draws a heavy line through Nanga Parbat and Karakoram 2. He scribbles down the completion dates, his breath misting in the freezing air. Then comes the brutal arithmetic. He crunches the numbers against his self-imposed 1,000-day deadline. The result is terrifying. To make this work, the margin for error is 0. He has 8 mountains left, and time is bleeding away. This means no rest days, pushing the limits of human endurance and gambling, that the weather gods will grant him a perfect window 8 separate times. Mingote stares at the names of the monsters left on his list: Everest, the circus of the world; Kangchenjunga, the untamed giant; Makalu Annapurna; Dhaulagiri Karakoram 1, Shishapangma, Cho Oyu. These aren't just names on a map, they are distinct personalities, each with a unique temperament and a preferred method of killing climbers. But there is no room for hesitation. The timeline is dictating his reality, and the clock refuses to pause. Autumn arrives in 2019. The setting is Nepal, at the foot of Dhaulagiri. Standing at 8,167 meters, it is the 7th highest point on Earth. The locals call it the White Mountain, a fitting name for a colossal isolated fortress of ice protected by terrified gorges. It is beautiful, but it is a graveyard. The mortality statistics here are some of the grimmest in the Himalayas, a place where many check in but never check out. This mountain utilizes every weapon in its arsenal: massive avalanches, spontaneous rockfalls, and storms that materialize out of thin air. Dhaulagiri has 0 tolerance for arrogance. When Mingote rolls into base camp, he links up with Juan Pablo Moore. Moore is a Chilean powerhouse, a purist who also refuses to use supplemental oxygen. They aren't strangers. Having shared ropes on previous expeditions, they share a deep, unspoken trust in each other's technical wizardry. They agree to tackle this beast as a team. After the traumatic events involving Tomov, Sergi is incredibly guarded about who he ties himself to. But in the death zone, solitude is often a death sentence. Climbing an 8,000er solo amplifies every risk exponentially. However, the autumn season in the Himalayas is essentially Russian roulette with atmospheric pressure. You pull the trigger and hope the chamber is empty. The summer monsoon rains have pulled back, but the ferocious winter jet stream is already revving its engines. The climbing windows are terrifyingly narrow and impossible to forecast accurately. Mingote and Moore pore over the meteorological data, cross-referencing with other expeditions. The consensus is unanimous: don't go. The air is too unstable. But logic doesn't drive this project. The calendar does. The countdown timer doesn't care about cloud cover. They make the call. They are going up. The push begins smoothly moving through the lower camps with the efficiency of veterans. But as they breach the upper atmosphere and near the summit zone, their judgment falters. They commit to a specific couloir, a steep vertical gutter of snow and ice that looks like a direct elevator to the ridge. Visually, it seems like the most logical path. Offers, no purchase, hiding a sheet of offers, no purchase, hiding a sheet of bulletproof ice beneath. Their crampons scratch uselessly and the ice axes fail to bite. Every step becomes a gamble with gravity, a constant threat of slipping and dragging the other man into the abyss. Mingote and Moore freeze, driving their axes in as deep as possible to catch their breath. They are at a crossroads. Retreat means forfeiting the day, likely missing the weather window and failing the expedition. Pushing upward means dancing on the edge of catastrophe. They lock eyes. No words are needed, just a grim nod. They commit to the suffering. The couloir seems to elongate, stretching upward forever while the cold gnaws at their extremities. Their legs have turned to jelly buckling under the dual assault of physical exhaustion and oxygen deprivation. When they finally crest the ridge, it feels like surfacing from deep water, a desperate gasp for life. The terrain flattens out, technically easier, but the atmosphere turns hostile. The wind begins to scream and the world dissolves into white. Mingote glances at his wrist altimeter. Less than 100 meters of vertical gain remain. Moore signals his agreement. To turn around now after surviving that hellish couloir is impossible. It is October 1st, 2019. They stand on the summit of Dhaulagiri, enveloped in a raging blizzard. They embrace two exhausted figures in a white void, shouting celebrations that are instantly ripped away by the gale. There is no view, no panorama. The summit photos capture only a chaotic blur of parka hoods and snow. The wind is so violent, it threatens to tear the flags right out of their frozen grip. But the job is done. Mingote has secured his 7th 8,000er. The project is exactly 50% complete. Now comes the hardest part, getting down alive. They refuse to go back down the suicide couloir. Instead, they improvise, selecting a different, longer route for the descent to avoid the trap they just escaped. Darkness swallows them. They are navigating by headlamp, trying to follow the faint wind-blown traces of previous climbers. It is a nightmare descent. At times, the snow is so soft they sink to their waists, struggling to swim through the powder. Moore twists his leg badly but grits his teeth and keeps moving. Mingote takes the lead, his voice raw as he shouts, commands and encouragement practically willing the team down the mountain. When the sun finally rises, they stumble into the safety of the camp. They are battered, exhausted, but miraculously alive. They have survived against the odds. Later, back at base camp, Sergi speaks to a camera for an interview. His voice is wrecked, his skin burned by frost and sun, but his gaze is unflinching. "We walked the razor's edge," he admits. "We misread the route. We made a mistake. We were incredibly fortunate that the mountain didn't make us pay the ultimate price." The statement ripples through the climbing world, polarizing the audience. Was this a display of heroic endurance or foolish recklessness? Some praise his transparency, others shake their heads at the risk. Mingote doesn't bother to debate them. He knows the truth of the high peaks at 8,000 meters. Luck outweighs skill every time. You can be the most technically gifted mountaineer on the planet, but if a serac collapses or an avalanche releases at the wrong moment, you are erased. Tomov was a master, yet he is gone. Mingote and Moore took a gamble that should have killed them, yet they are here, eating soup. Is it fair? No. There is no justice in the death zone, only cold statistics and blind chance. 7 summits down, 7 to go. It has been 444 days since he started this madness. He has used exactly half his time to achieve half his goals. The symmetry is beautiful but deceptive. The remaining mountains are the true titans. Annapurna is an avalanche factory. Kangchenjunga requires climbing endless vertical walls. And Everest. Everest is a chaotic mix of amateur crowds and lethal weather. The second half of this project isn't just a physical test. It is a final exam where failure means death. Mingote opens his journal again. He draws a line through Dhaulagiri. Beside the name, he scribbles a reminder on the edge. He shuts the book, 7 down. 7 times he rolled the dice and won. 7 times he came home. How long can a winning streak last before the house takes it all back? Spring 2020. Mingote is safe in his living room in Catalonia, staring at the television in horror. The world is locking its doors. One by one, borders snap shut. Nepal issues the decree, no expeditions. The mountains are closed. Pakistan quickly follows, sealing its borders. China remains quiet, but permits for Tibet have vanished. A microscopic virus, COVID-19, has managed to do what the fiercest storms and most vertical walls could not. It has paralyzed the world of high-altitude mountaineering. The plans for Annapurna and Makalu this spring are instantly vaporized. The logistics were set. The flights were booked. The permits were stamped. The team was primed. Now it is all garbage. Mingote is frantic, burning up the phone lines to organizers and sponsors, hunting for a loophole, a backdoor, anything. Can we get a special visa for Pakistan? Is a private charter possible? The answer is a monotonous, echoing no. The Himalayas are off limits, indefinitely. He sits down with his calculator. 7 summits in 444 days was a pace for the history books perfectly aligned with his 1,000-day target. But if spring is canceled and summer is uncertain and autumn potentially compromised, then the entire architectural structure of the project collapses. The timer is still running, but he is trapped in Europe. Mingote makes the hard call. He officially revises the mission parameters, 14 peaks in 4 years. It is no longer the 1,000-day sprint, but it would still shatter the previous world record. No human has ever collected all 14 crowns that quickly. It is a compromise, and it tastes like ash in his mouth. But it is the only realistic path forward. The alternative is to quit, to sit and wait for a world that might never return to normal. The new goal is locked in. But now he faces a new problem, stagnation. He cannot simply sit on his couch letting his cardiovascular system decay and his muscles waste away. For a man like Mingote, stillness is death. If he cannot fight the mountains, he must find a new adversary to keep his body honed as a weapon. He goes to the garage and dusts off his bicycle. It is the same machine he used to set a speed record 2 decades ago. It is time to ride again. He spreads maps of Europe across his table and plots a massive trajectory, 7,000 kilometers, 7 countries. He brands it the Olympic route, tying it to Barcelona's bid for the Winter Games to give it weight and purpose. It's good PR, good symbolism, and keeps the sponsors happy, but underneath the marketing, the goal is purely physical suffering. Mingote rolls out of Catalonia and begins to pedal. He rides day after day, a solitary figure moving through a paralyzed continent. He crosses the Alps, grinds over the Pyrenees, and navigates silent valleys. The roads are ghostly empty. The lockdowns have trapped everyone inside. He is alone with his bike, a backpack, and a small tent. He punishes himself with 150 to 200 kilometers of riding every single day. His heart rate stays in the red zone, his lungs work like bellows, and his legs harden into steel. This isn't a leisure tour. It is a desperate bid to maintain his edge. Along the route, he parks the bike and looks up. He targets the classic Alpine 4000ers. Mont Blanc, the Matterhorn. Gran Paradiso, the royalty of European climbing. Over the course of a few months, he summits 20 of these peaks. It is aggressive, active recovery, keeping his climbing instincts sharp and his acclimatization decent, even if it isn't the death zone. Every ascent is a simulation, a way to keep his mind ready for the return to the Himalayas. The media loves the narrative twist. The headlines shift from his climbing records to his resilience. The grounded alpinist cycles Europe. Interviews and features begin to pile up again. Mingote handles the press duties from the road, often conducting video calls while gasping for air on a mountain pass. He has successfully pivoted, turning a global disaster into a new chapter of his legacy. The lesson is clear: when the straight path is blocked, you carve a new road through the wilderness. His sponsors breathe a sigh of relief. The visibility is there. The Mingote brand remains relevant and active. He isn't surrendering to the virus. He is outmaneuvering it. The funding remains secure. The contracts are renewed. The dream is delayed, but it is very much alive. His foundation. ONAT pivots hard. Since physical sports are off the table, they move the whole operation into the virtual world. By the time the leaves turn in autumn, Mingote wraps up an absolute beast of a cycling marathon. We're talking 7,000 kilometers, 20 different alpine summits, and a non-stop circuit of meetings and speeches. He's not just fit, he's a machine. His body is dialed in, and his mind is razor sharp. But there's one massive question mark hanging over everything. When are the Himalayas finally going to unlock their doors? He is glued to the wire, scouring news out of Nepal, haunting the climbing forums and burning up the phone lines with expedition organizers. The rumor mill isn't just spinning, it's completely out of control. You've got one camp swearing spring of 2021 is green lit. The other side is shaking their heads, betting on 2022. That kind of limbo eats at a climber's soul faster than the altitude ever could. Then winter 2021 hits. The borders crack open, and it's like a dam breaking. The floodgates just burst wide open. The mountaineering community, having been caged up for a year in lockdown, descends on Pakistan like a starving pack. Everyone has the same target in their crosshairs, K2. It's the final frontier, the last great prize, the only 8,000er that hasn't been tamed in winter. In summer, the savage mountain kills one climber for every 4 who summit. In winter, it becomes a frozen nightmare. Picture temperatures plunging to minus 60 degrees, winds hitting with hurricane force, avalanches that strike without a whisper of warning. Up here, a single slip isn't a mistake, it's a death sentence. Yet ambition is blinding everyone to the fear. Base camp looks like a kicked anthill. 60 climbers crammed in together, a record-breaking crowd for a winter season. And let's be clear, this isn't a squad of elite special ops. It's a total ragtag mix. You've got the absolute legends of the sport rubbing shoulders with commercial tourists. These are folks who wrote massive checks and expect 5-star service even when they're standing in the death zone. And right in the eye of this storm stands Sergi Mingote. He's not just there to climb, he's wearing the co-leader badge for 7 Summit Treks, the biggest outfit on the hill. It's a dual role, but honestly, it feels more like a trap. On one side, he's the ringmaster of this massive operation, juggling logistics, soothing anxious clients, and trying to keep the chaos at bay. On the flip side, he's a climbing purist, chasing his 8th 8,000er without using supplemental oxygen. By day, he's putting out fires in camp, organizing kit, and debating with guides. But in the back of his mind, he's ticking to his own rhythm, committed to climbing pure. And he didn't just bring his ice axes, he brought a mission. Stashed deep in his duffels are nearly 280 kilograms of high-end gear for the local porters. Jackets, boots, thermals, he's handing them out, shaking hands, sharing smiles. It's a noble gesture, but it's like trying to warm up a blizzard with a match. It barely dents the tense atmosphere gripping the camp. The mountain is packed tight. Seasoned experts are watching in horror, predicting fatal bottlenecks on the technical sections. Just imagine a gridlock traffic jam, but you're at an altitude where your lungs are already screaming for air. If one person freezes up, the entire line grinds to a halt. Every second you wait, you're freezing. You're bleeding strength. You're burning through resources you don't have. The tension is thicker than the fog. The arguments start. Who leads? Who fixes the ropes? Which high-paying client gets priority? By the middle of January, the chaos hits a fever pitch. Under this crushing weight of responsibility and the pressure of other people's egos, Mingote gears up for his final acclimatization rotation. It's January 16th, 2021. High above, the Nepalese team is currently rewriting history, standing on the summit and claiming the first ever winter ascent of K2. The internet is blowing up, and the entire climbing world is cheering, but Sergi Mingote isn't checking the feeds. He's focused on his own timeline. He's sitting at 7,000 meters in Camp 3, satisfied. His acclimatization is done. The game plan is crystal clear. Get back down to base camp, recharge the batteries, and wait for the weather gods to grant a window for the real push. He starts his descent down the Abruzzi Spur, the classic trade route worn in by decades of boots. He's not alone. He's got his partner, the Chilean powerhouse Juan Pablo Moore. These guys are a solid unit. They tackled Dhaulagiri together, so the trust is absolute. And the conditions. For a K2 winter, it's a dream. Crystal clear skies, a manageable 25 below, and barely a breath of wind. It felt like the hard work was behind them. Walking down after a practice run is supposed to be the easy part, just routine. It was technical work, sure, but stuff they'd done 1,000 times. They cruise past Camp 1 at 6,000 meters. Below them stretches the run down to advanced base camp. It's a long slope, not vertically steep, maybe 40 or 50 degrees, but winter transforms it. It's not snow anymore, it's a mirror. The relentless wind has stripped away every ounce of soft snow, exposing the blue ice. It's hard as reinforced concrete and slicker than oiled glass. You have to stomp your crampons with everything you've got just to get a purchase. Every step is a battle for friction. Mingote is descending just a few paces behind Moore. They're traversing the fixed lines, those stationary ropes that are supposed to be your guarantee. You clip in, you feel safe. Or at least you think you are. Because right here on a section that feels like a sidewalk compared to the summit, the mountain decides to flex. No blizzard, no avalanche roar, just blue ice silence and one heartbeat that changes the world. Mingote falls. Suddenly he is disconnected from the rope and begins to slide. It doesn't make sense. Later, the Sherpas and experts would analyze the rigging with a fine-tooth comb. The ropes were solid, the anchors held. There was absolutely no mechanical failure. So how we're left with two nightmares. The first is a tiny human error. That fraction of a second, when you unclip from one rope to snap onto the next. Maybe he lost his balance, and when you factor in exhausted muscles, thick, clumsy mittens, and the brain fog of hypoxia, it's a terrifying possibility. The second theory is even darker, an external force. Juan Pablo Moore would later suggest that Sergi might have been taken out by a rockfall, a stray stone rocketing down, striking him, stunning him, or knocking him clean off his feet. Moore hears at first a sickening sound behind him, the unnatural hiss of a body sliding over bulletproof ice. He spins around to see his friend turning into a projectile. The Chilean screams his lungs out, self-arrest, dig, and break. But physics doesn't care about desperation. On the concrete, hard blue ice of K. To self-arrest is a myth. The ice axe doesn't dig in, it just skitters across the surface. The crampons can't find a bite. If you're not clipped in, gravity takes the wheel instantly. Mingote plummets down the couloir, a terrifying 600-meter drop. It's a long, violent, uncontrolled slide that finally ends way down the mountain near advanced base camp. The silence slams back into place on the slope as quickly as it broke, but miles away a digital alarm starts screaming. Sergi's GPS tracker pings a dataset that makes your blood run cold. Terminal velocity descent followed by an instant zero movement stop. It's not a glitch. It's the signature of a catastrophe. The first ones to sprint toward the crash site near advanced base camp are the climbers nearby, Alex Gavan from Romania and the Italian Tamara Lunger. From high above, risking his own life, Juan Pablo Moore down climbs as fast as he can. They find Sergi lying on the snow. He's alive, still breathing, but he's deep in a coma. The damage is catastrophic. His body is shattered from the 600-meter impact. Gavan and Lunger are frantic, administering first aid and screaming into their radios for a medic. A rescue team loaded with oxygen launches immediately from main base camp. But the geography is against them. It's just too far. They have maybe 40 minutes. That's it. 40 minutes of absolute helplessness in a frozen wasteland. Sergi never wakes up. The entire time, Juan Pablo Moore cradles his best friend, talking to him, trying to share body heat, staying right there in the snow with him until the light fades out. The doctor from base camp never stood a chance of getting there in time. Sergi Mingote's heart beats its last on the flanks of the very monster he came to tame. The tragic news circles the globe at the speed of light, but it hits with a particularly cruel irony. Mingote passes away on the exact same afternoon that the Nepali team is celebrating their impossible victory on the summit. The world's headlines run the brutal split-screen triumph and tragedy. Humanity made history that day, sure, but the mountain demanded a heavy tax in return. For Juan Pablo Moore, the nightmare doesn't end with evacuating his friend's body. He makes a gut-wrenching choice. He decides to stay. He vows to finish the climb and dedicate the summit to Sergi's memory. It's a beautiful tribute and one that would seal his own fate. Only a few weeks later, on February 5th, Moore disappears into the white void during his summit push. He is never seen again, swallowed by the mountain just like his partner. Back in Mingote's hometown of Parets del Valles, the community freezes their grief into bronze. They raise a monument in the town square, a sculpture of an eagle with wings fully spread. It captures the signature pose Sergi would strike every time he stood on top of another 8,000er arms wide embracing the sky. His spirit survives in his posthumous books, and the raw footage of the documentary K2 Winter, which chronicles that doomed expedition. But the shadow of that season still hangs over the sport. It split the mountaineering world right down the middle. One side argues Sergi was a casualty of the circus, the commercial chaos, that has no business on K2 in winter. The other side insists it was just bad luck, a tragic accident that could happen to the best professional on earth. So where do you land on this? Is chasing a record worth rolling the dice with your life? Or are these massive crowd-filled winter expeditions a fatal mistake from the get-go? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This is one of those stories that we need to keep talking about.